The Trump administration's escalating trade war with India is facing backlash at home in the United States. A new survey by the US-based Democracy Institute showing 53% of Americans believe the US should not have imposed tariffs on India over its continued oil trade with Russia. Just 43% support the move. In fact, the response follows Trump's last week announcement, remember, when Trump slapped an additional second 25% tariff on India for its Russian oil purchase, bringing the total to 50%. And it is among the highest that the US has imposed on any country. Trump has also ruled out any trade talks with New Delhi until the tariff issue is resolved. And despite the rising tensions, the broader American view of India remains favorable. 64% believe that they see India's growing global economic influence as a good thing. Meanwhile, at home, economic pressures are mounting. Moody's chief economist has warned that more US industries are beginning to cut jobs. And according to a new Morning Consult poll, 6 in 10 Americans say that the Trump administration is contributing to their rising cost of living. And what's the reason? Stubborn debt, inflation, and stagnant wages. And with us on the broadcast from Chicago is Greg Swenson, who is a foreign affairs analyst and economist. Good to have you with us. Thanks very much for being here. I have to start off by asking you your assessment of those survey numbers and what they indicate about the sentiment on the ground as far as Trump's India tariff moves are concerned.
Yeah, I think the word you used, sentiment, is important here because the viewers, the voters, are constantly barraged with negative commentary about President Trump's economic policy. So I'm not surprised that the sentiment is negative, and that many voters in America that are polled, and I'm not sure about the credibility of that particular poll, but I think generally speaking, the polls are pretty consistent that people have a negative, the majority have a negative view on his policies. But that's the sentiment, and it's totally different than the reality. The reality on the ground is real wages are up 1.2% this year. This is after 4 years of the Biden administration where real wages were down 4% over his term. And so the inflation numbers came out today, 2.7. That's unchanged from June. It's below the 2.8% expectation. The lower energy prices are helping with affordability. So the interesting thing about the surveys is they talk about wages and cost of living, and those are actually quite manageable right now. There's been no evidence of inflation from the tariffs. You have a couple of isolated industries or sectors like appliances and tires, but those aren't really things that people need to buy every day. If you look at the overall cost of living, it's quite manageable. Cars, used cars, new cars, travel, all lower in July, year over year. So it's pretty interesting to see the divergence between what's really happening and the sentiment.
So are you saying that all is well on the ground, economically speaking? Because, we also have that statement coming in, for example, from the Moody's chief economist, who basically has warned about those job cuts in U.S. industries. Also that poll, which gave us an indication of what the Americans think about the cost of living.
Right. It's interesting. And I think a lot of these economists are political opponents of the president. So there's definitely some bias in there. And they've sort of translated, political opinion into trying to translate it into empirical science, and it's just not working because what is happening on the ground is pretty positive. I mean, I think the most important factor is the one I mentioned, which is real wage growth. And that is happening right now. And yes, there are a couple of sectors that might be experiencing higher prices, but those, if anything, are one-time price adjustments from tariffs. But there's been no meaningful evidence of inflation from the tariffs. Of course, the caveat is that could happen, and maybe we haven't seen the full impact of the tariffs yet. But the expectation from consumers in America right now, the inflation expectations have gone down, and that's really interesting. That that's fallen for the second straight month, and so. Again, I try to keep it in context. If you looked at it only 3 years ago, we had 9% inflation in the US. That was from too much money chasing too few goods. And right now we have a policy, economic policy from this administration that is very anti-inflation. It's deregulatory, so you're going to see more output from American businesses as the deregulation movement takes effect. That happened in his first term. We expect that to happen again. And then, of course, you have lower taxes with the big, beautiful bill. So we're very optimistic.
All right, remains to be seen how far that optimism really goes and what the expectations versus reality scenario really looks like in time to come and even right now. Of course, we're leaving it there for the moment. Thanks very much for your perspectives.
Thanks, Molly. Thanks for having me.
And we're staying on with updates coming in from the United States. Washington, D.C. is on edge. President Donald Trump has announced federal takeover of D.C. police and ordered mobilization of 800 National Guard troops in the U.S. Capitol. Listen to this.
Today we're declaring public safety emergency in the District of Columbia, and Attorney General Pam Bondi, who's fantastic, is taking command of the Metropolitan Police Department as of this moment. And I'll be making the appropriate notifications to Congress and to the mayor.
Trump has invoked emergency presidential powers. But soon a legal battle could break out in the courtrooms. Washington, D.C. comes under the administration of the District of Columbia, but its management is unlike any other American city. In fact, despite having a separate mayor and council, ultimate power over the city rests with the Congress and in some cases, the president himself. Trump announced he is taking command of the Metropolitan Police using a provision in the 1973 Home Rule Act, which basically allows him to deploy the force for federal purposes in an emergency. But this power has its limits. He can do it for up to 48 hours or for 30 days if he notifies key congressional leaders. Any extension beyond 30 days will require congressional approval. Trump is also deploying the DC National Guard. Unlike National Guard units in other parts, a National Guards in the capital is always under presidential command and can be deployed without the consent of the local government. The act basically limits the use of the military for domestic law enforcement, but the Justice Department has long held that this ban does not apply to the DC Guard. And when it comes to federalizing the entire DC government, Donald Trump cannot do it alone. Under the Constitution of the United States, he would require backing of the Congress for the complete takeover of DC. And the DC mayor has criticized Trump's action, noting that the city had achieved its lowest violent crime rate in 30 years. She emphasized that crime had declined not only from its post-pandemic peak in 2023.
We are American citizens. Our families go to war. We pay taxes and we uphold the responsibilities of citizenship. And while this action today is unsettling and unprecedented, I can't say that given some of the rhetoric of the past, that we're totally surprised.
This is not the first time Trump has flexed his special powers. He deployed federal officers to clear protesters in 2020 and delayed mobilizing help during the January 6 attack on the Capitol. And the move has sparked mixed reactions. Some welcomed it while others took to the streets in Washington to protest. Here's what some of the people had to say.
Growing up in Washington, D.C., it's very hard to see this city being captured by Donald Trump and making everybody live in fear. I don't approve of it. I just think it's a bad move, and the backlash is going to be really severe against him and his administration.
We are a really over-policed city already, and I just feel like DC should be a state. You know, we deserve representation just like people all over the country have.
I think Trump's trying to help people, some people, I think, but as far as he try to get homeless out of the city, so that ain't gonna work.
In the political discourse, it's not about do we solve these issues or do we not. It's what is our disagreement and how we go about solving those things. That's a personal viewpoint, but I think public safety is a concern for everybody, and if their perspective is to create a sense of security, I'm not opposed to that.
And on to India now. The country's apex court has agreed with the Election Commission that an Aadhaar card alone cannot prove citizenship. The decision comes amid a fierce legal and political battle over voter list revision in the poll-bound state of Bihar. The Supreme Court bench said Section 9 of the Aadhaar Act makes it clear Aadhaar is not a conclusive proof of citizenship and that it must be verified further using other documents. As of June 2025, over 142 crore Indians have Aadhaar cards, and that is way beyond any other document Indians possess. In fact, it is used by over 150 entities, including the government ministries, for facial recognition. In July alone, Aadhaar facial authentications hit record 19.36 crore transactions. Senior lawyer Kapil Sibal, arguing for the petitioners, warned that the process could lead to mass deletions from the voter list, especially for those who cannot submit new forms. Sibal claimed the ECI removed 6.5 million names without surveys on deaths or migration. The top court remarked that if the ECI did not or does not have the power to list documents for voter registration, everything ends. But if they have the power, there cannot be a problem. The Election Commission says it is acting under Article 324 of the Constitution. It argues the revision is needed because the rolls have not been thoroughly updated in nearly 20 years. Migration, immigration, demographic changes have left the voter list outdated. The Election Commission has issued the list of valid documents for voter registration. Failure to produce one of these documents could trigger suspicion of one being an illegal alien and invite cases under the Citizenship Act. This legal and political hotspot could shape voter rolls and election outcomes. With lower birth registrations, high school dropout rates and other socioeconomic realities at play, people without valid documents are left with very little choice. The government's offices are flooded with the applications for valid documents. From legal to administrative front, the voter registration exercise is turning out to be an uphill task, with millions of people waiting to know if they will be allowed to vote. And the clock is ticking, and there is little time left before the assembly elections in Bihar. Shifting focus for now, Israel's actions in the Gaza Strip continuing as Netanyahu pushes to seize control over Gaza City. In the latest strikes, at least 15 people were killed, mostly children, in 2 separate incidents in Gaza City. 6 journalists have also been killed in recent Israeli strikes. Desperate scenes unfolded on Tuesday in Gaza City as an Israeli strike killed a dozen people from an extended family in a neighborhood, including a mother and her 3 children. During the funeral service, the man whose family was killed lashed out at Hamas for triggering the war. In another strike, authorities at Al-Shifa Hospital said that a tent sheltering a displaced family was targeted, killing a couple and their child. Amid the relentless military offensive and threats of taking over Gaza City, Israeli opposition chief has backed calls for a general strike in solidarity with hostages still held in Gaza. In a post on X, Yair Lapid sought to portray the strike as non-political and even called on the supporters of the Netanyahu government to go on strike. On Monday, the Hostages and Missing Families Forum, the main representative group for relatives, backed the idea. The group also accused the government of sacrificing the remaining hostages on the altar of an endless, aimless war. Israel's main trade union federation has refused to join in the strike, but has said it would support worker solidarity demonstrations. Israel's heightened offensive in Gaza has sparked widespread protests by Israelis and families of hostages. They have accused Netanyahu of prolonging the war in Gaza for political interests, while Netanyahu maintains that defeating Hamas completely is the only way to secure Israel from another October 7 attack. Last week, Israel's security cabinet had approved plans to expand the war into the remaining parts of Gaza, not yet controlled by the military, sparking fears that more hostages could die. Of the hostages taken captive during Hamas's October 2023 attack, 49 are reportedly still held in Gaza, including 27 the Israeli military says are dead. In fact, over 61,000 Palestinians have been killed since Israel began its offensive in Gaza. UK Prime Minister is on the brink of achieving an unwanted milestone. Keir Starmer's power promising to smash the gangs behind the crossings and curbing UK's migration crisis is seeing almost 50,000 people cross the channel on his watch. And Starmer attained these numbers far more quickly than his Tory predecessors reportedly, including Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson. Home Office figures showing that up to Sunday, over 49,700 people have arrived since the 5th of July 2024. Conservatives claim the 50,000 threshold has been hit. Official statistics likely confirm the milestone later today. This would mean that Keir Starmer, who won a power promising to smash the gangs behind the crossings, has seen 50,000 crossings on his watch in 401 days. Nearly 20,000 migrants crossed the channel to the UK in the first 6 months of this year, a rise of almost 50% on the number of crossings in 2024 and a new record for the first half of a year. The Conservative Party has slammed the Starmer government, saying the migrant crossing totals showed Labour had surrendered the borders. In fact, Starmer's government is hoping a new one-in, one-out deal with France that came into force last week will deter crossings, with some migrants now facing the prospect of being detained and returned. The one-in, one-out plot will see the UK return some migrants to France in exchange for receiving the same number of asylum seekers who are believed to have legitimate claims. On to Bolivia, which is just days away from a crucial presidential election. Voters head to the polls on August 17. The country is reeling under the worst economic crisis in decades, with shortages of fuel, dollars, basic food items, bringing daily struggles to millions. And on the last day of the presidential campaign, the party candidate Manfred Reyes Villa promised to end the fuel crisis without turning to international lenders. The Christian Democratic Party hopeful Rodrigo Pereira, meanwhile, was also on a campaign trail declaring that he would represent ordinary families, workers and laborers. But the country's 2 decades of left-wing rule could be coming to an end, as the race for presidency is dominated by 2 right-wing heavyweights, conservative ex-president Tuto and the centre-right business tycoon Samuel Doria. Both are running neck and neck in polls with around 20% support for each. And with no candidate expected to clear the 40% threshold with a 10-point lead, the political showdown will be shifting to the runoff elections that are slated to take place on October 19. After nearly 20 years in power, the ruling party is polling in single digits, weighed down by economic collapse and internal divisions. The former president, Morales, who is barred from running for the top job, has urged supporters to spoil ballots, raising fears of political unrest similar to 2019. Colombian presidential candidate Miguel Uribe has passed away 2 months after being shot at a campaign rally. His death renewing deep concern over the return of political violence. In fact, Uribe's wife confirmed his passing in a social media post, writing, "Rest in peace, love of my life. Thank you for a life full of love."
We know that in Miguel's heart, his struggle and what he wished for all of us Colombians is unity, peace, and love. I reject any act of violence or any act of vengeance for Miguel's death, because to honor him, there should only be love in our hearts.
People have gathered at the spot where Uribe was gunned down, people seeing his death as a setback for the country. The 39-year-old conservative senator was struck in the head and leg by gunfire on June 7 during a rally in the capital by a suspected 15-year-old hitman. The Colombian defense minister has announced that the second-in-command of the FARC dissident group suspected of involvement in the assassination of Uribe was killed by rival rebels on Venezuelan soil. Authorities say 6 suspects have been arrested in connection with the assassination, including the teenage gunman, captured on the spot by Uribe's own bodyguards. Following a nationwide manhunt, the police also announced the capture of the suspected mastermind, El Costeño. The president said the government's duty is to condemn crime, no matter the ideology behind it. He stressed that ensuring the safety of all Colombians remains his top priority. The vice president took to social media, calling it a sad day for the country, stressing that violence must no longer define the country's future. In Washington, meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State, a vocal critic of Colombia's leftist administration, is calling for justice in the wake of Uribe's death. Rubio said the United States stands with Uribe's family and the people of Colombia, both in grief and in demanding accountability for those responsible. Uribe entered politics early, winning a Bogota City Council seat at 26 and becoming its youngest chairperson after losing the 2019 mayoral race. He won a Senate seat in 2022 with the highest vote count in Colombia. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Race to Power. This is me, Molly Gambhir, signing off. Thanks for watching.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
WION, India's global voice. The channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One.
The stress of our world can take a toll on our physical and emotional health. Here, in New York's Catskill Mountains, lies a luxurious place of healing called WION Wellness Center. The WION Wellness Center provides 500,000 square feet of natural methods to manage diabetes, hypertension, chronic pain, obesity, depression, anxiety, and other conditions. We use the traditions of centuries-old natural science from India, yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy in personalized programs that help you take charge of your own health. A minimum 5-day stay is recommended for best results. Book now at yo1.com.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening. As we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at